Welcome to There is a Method to the Madness. My name is Rob Maxwell, and I'm an exercise physiologist and personal trainer, and I've been in the business for the past 25 years. This podcast is all about fitness-related and wellness-related subjects, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Gildan Group Realtors. John and Lynn do an awesome job of helping you sell your home and finding what you need. And let me tell you something, they're also great athletes. They've come out and run some of my events, and I think John actually won the run, so that's pretty darn impressive. I think people who pay attention to their physical fitness tend to do better at their jobs too. So if you guys want a great real estate group, the Gildan Group is going to be your group, and they can be reached at thegildangroup.com. Today's subject is during, and post-race nutrition. So before I get into that, let me just say, don't be intimidated when you hear pre-race, post-race, or whatever. And of course, the operative word here is race. So, when I'm talking about racing, I'm talking about endurance events such as 5Ks, 10Ks, triathlons, marathons, bike races, master swim. They're all great ways to stay in shape. That's really what it's all about. It's about bettering yourself and staying in shape. And as I said in my intro, I've been doing this a long time. And one of the things I've always tried to advise my clients to get into is to find a sport, find something that makes them happy about going out to train. And I've had many clients that say, I need an event to train for because I'm just not motivated. Like getting up and going to the gym 2 or 3 times a week and, worrying about the scale and worrying about, maybe some of the weight numbers and all, that wasn't doing it for them. They needed something to compete for. And I get that. And I think it's great to have goals. And I think that finding, that's always been like one of the things I love about different sports is, you train for it, you do it, you feel great about it. And I've just seen so many people stay on a healthy track once finding endurance events, whatever they like to do, whether it be, again, running races, anywhere from 5K to a marathon, or cycling races, or triathlons, or duathlons, where it's run, bike, run, or now they have aquathons, I think, and it's a swim bike. So, whatever. I just think like you're competing against you ultimately, bettering yourself. And I've seen people like stay on the healthy path once they found it and it was no longer work and drudgery. So, try it. If you haven't done it, try it. If you've done it and you haven't set a goal in a while, set one. Challenge yourself to do something you've never done before. So with that in mind, let's talk about how to best prepare. And today's preparation is about eating. First and foremost, let me talk a little bit about carbohydrates, all right? They are not the devil, they are not the boogeyman, and they don't make you fat, okay? Eating or drinking too much makes you fat, and I don't care what it is. If you eat more calories than you need, you're gonna get fat. It has nothing to do with the types of food you eat. Now, some types of food you may eat more of because they taste better. That is not the food's fault, okay? That's your fault because you're eating too much of it. So we need carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are the most important macronutrient in our diet. There are 3 types of macronutrients that provide energy: carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. Carbohydrates should make up at least 55% of your diet, and that's just for a normal person. If you're doing endurance events of any kind, it needs to be over 60%. And ultra-endurance athletes need to take in 70% of their diet in carbohydrates. So that's a lot of carbs. People, we're supposed to eat carbs. We need it. Did you know that the only energy your brain can run on is carbohydrates? Your brain needs glucose to function. So, when people get on those paleo, any of these low fat, I guess it's keto now, they've just changed the names, but diets that they can't think, it's called brain fog. They feel like they're a little bit out of it, a little old slow to the draw there, well, they are. The brain isn't firing adequately because it doesn't have enough glucose. And if you take that too far, it can get dangerous. And, we've seen people do that before. You need to have your carbohydrates, all right? So little science for you. Our body stores up to 500 grams of glucose. And when we store it in our body, that's called glycogen, okay? Glycogen is stored in the body, 500 grams. I'm going to kind of do this podcast a little bit like I lectured and say certain things slow because it's important to hear, all right? We store 100 grams of glycogen in our liver and 400 grams of glycogen in our muscles. Each gram of carbohydrate carries 4 calories. All right, so that means our body can store up to 2,000 calories of carbohydrates. It's the glycogen that we use for fuel. So like as I'm sitting here right now, I'm not very active. I'm sitting in my chair and I'm speaking into the microphone. I'm still using carbohydrate to do that. All right, I'm still using glycogen to do that, stored carbohydrate. We don't just start using the food we put into our mouths as energy. It's got to first be digested, then it's got to be absorbed, and then it goes to the blood cells. Now, the muscle cells, I'm sorry. So, if it's a basic carbohydrate meal, that can take up to 2 hours. So what are you using for your energy? That's the stored glycogen. Now you might think, well, what about fat? Yes, we're also using fat. We use fat when the intensity is very low, like sitting around, or when the durations are very long, then we're using fat. High intensity and shorter duration, we're using carbohydrates, all right? But here's the kicker. If you don't have enough glycogen in your body or enough glucose, you can't burn fat. So that's like why, and again, I'm not going to get off on this, bashing the low carb diet for the sake of fat loss, because that's not the point of this podcast today. All right, the point of this podcast is endurance fueling. All right, but the Krebs cycle says you cannot burn fat without carbs. It specifically says that fat burns in a carbohydrate flame. Okay, fat burns in a carbohydrate flame. So if you're out of carbs, you can't burn fat. Oh man, sorry keto. So you're thinking, well, keto basically means you're in ketosis and you're burning fat. Correct. You're burning fat because your muscles are actually being broken down and you're actually burning up your muscle tissue. All right. It's called gluconeogenesis, basically making glycogen out of new tissue, out of muscle. Okay, gluconeogenesis. That's not a good thing. We lose muscle, our metabolism is lower. We lose weight, sure, most of it's muscle, okay? I said I wasn't going to go on that rant, and then I did. All right, so back to race fueling. So we need glucose. We need glycogen. So somebody asked, what about, race fueling? Okay, so we're going to start right there. You have to always keep your glycogen levels full. If you're doing endurance events on a regular basis, or you're a dude in the gym and you're trying to put on muscle, the glycogen levels have to be filled up all the time. You have to be full. All right, those 2,000 calories / 500 grams need to be maximized every day. Endurance athletes call it glycogen loading. It's got to be full all the time. In other words, if you are on a low carb diet, or you just are, you don't know better, and you just don't really eat enough good carbohydrates to store, and then you try to do everything else, for example, have a nice good pre-game meal or pre-race meal, and then you do your nutrition during the event, well, guess what? It's not going to work. It's going to work better than if you didn't try at all, but if your glycogen levels aren't full, you're going to struggle on race day. I've done so many different events, and there are days, or races I should say, that I was in and I just felt flat. I mean, my legs were dead. They couldn't turn over. And it was because, somehow, some way, I let my glycogen levels run low, and I was just flat that day. And that's exactly what it's called, being flat. It sucks. You have no energy. There's nothing you can do about it at the time. Okay, so that's your first rule. You have to have your glycogen levels full. How do we do that? We eat complex carbohydrates predominantly in our diet, and we try to get in at least 60% of our diet in carbs. Keep a MyFitnessPal or another kind of food app, and just make sure your carbohydrates are over 60%. If they're not, get them up there. Don't have the carb fear. Eat the right kind of carbs. Complex carbohydrates are what are going to be stored as glycogen. All right? And that's called lower to moderately low glycemic index foods. All right? Glycemic index means how rapidly does it convert the sugar or glucose. When you're trying to store glycogen, you don't want it to convert to glucose quickly. Okay, those are quick sugar foods. We want the carbs that are going to store as glycogen. All right, that's going to be your rices, your sweet potatoes, most fruits except for like pineapples and super sugary foods like that. Most vegetables except for corns and peas, rye bread, sourdough bread, whole wheat pasta, quinoa, sweet potatoes, oatmeal, all of those beans, legumes, they're awesome. All of those carbohydrates are good for you and will store as glycogen, okay? So remember, eat those foods on a regular basis, track your food, and keep them at least 60% of your diet, and that's step one, okay? Now, let's talk a little bit about race day. If you can get up 2 hours before your event, 2.5 hours, and you're going to give your body time to digest the meal and start to absorb the meal, then it's imperative that you have a low glycemic index light breakfast. And when I mean light, somewhere around 300 to 400 calories or so, maybe 40 to 50 grams of carbohydrates. And these carbohydrates should be easy on the stomach, and only you know what that is. Like, I typically can have a cup of oats and a banana. So that's basically, a cup of oats is 300 calories right there, and it's predominantly carbohydrate. And a banana is 100, so that's 400. I can tolerate the oats if I do it 2.5 hours before. Some people can't. So you need to find your low glycemic, and remember, it's the same list I said earlier, low glycemic index foods, and have for a quote pre-game meal. What's the goal of that? It tops off your glycogen levels. That's all it does. It tops them off. It's kind of like if you're going to go on a long trip and your gas tank was 3/4 of the way full. When you woke up, you're like, what? Let's top it off. Let's go put $20 in the gas tank, or nowadays $80 in the gas tank, just to add 5 gallons. You know what I'm saying? So, but you just want to top it off a little bit. It's important that you top it off. When you sleep, your liver actually burns off its glycogen levels, so that's why sometimes you might wake up and you're getting those hunger pangs. You're not really hungry, but your liver has actually burned off its 100 grams or close. And so you want to top off the liver. All right, that's the first thing you want to do. All right. Now, for during the event, now if it's like a 5K or shorter, let's say 30 minutes or so or shorter, you don't need any during the race nutrition. Really even maybe a 10K or an hour or under a sprint triathlon, you may not either. It doesn't hurt to have hydration, of course, some water. And basically you need 6 ounces every 20 minutes to be exact. It's not a lot, but you need that. It's important. But it doesn't hurt to have a little if your event is over a 5K. So now you're going to want to have your higher glycemic index carbohydrates during, okay? Remember that. During the event, you're going to want to have your higher glycemic index carbohydrates. That would be like your sports drinks, and make sure they're real sports drinks and not Gatorade and stuff. That's nothing but sugar, but real sports drinks that you would get at a bike shop or order online. Basically, the carbohydrate in these sports drinks is called glucose polymers. Look on the back. Those are the carbohydrates that you want. And you're going to want them, they're higher glycemic, meaning they convert the blood sugar quicker, because that's what you want. If you're doing a marathon, half marathon, longer triathlon, man, this is imperative because we call this glycogen sparing, okay? If you take in a little bit of carbohydrate, roughly 100 calories worth every 30 to 40 minutes, that's not a lot, every 30 to 40 minutes. So if it's a long distance event, all right, so we're doing the Rock the Ridge event. My team, Team Max Fit, have a great group from the gym going. This is going to be in May, and we're covering 50 miles between 4 of us. Each of us has a pretty long leg, okay? So that's an example where we would want to practice all this stuff. So, every 30 to 40 minutes, I'm going to eat a GU, okay? A GU is a version of, slightly solidified carbohydrate. It looks like, basically frosting. Some of it tastes like frosting. I think it tastes great. But it's got 100 calories of carbohydrates, and again, mostly of the glucose polymers, so it converts to glucose quickly, so you spare the glycogen. You don't want to use up the glycogen. And you don't want to wait until near the end of the race to start your GUs. Then it's not glycogen sparing. You want to do it early. Like, let's say you're doing a half marathon and it takes you 2 hours to do. Okay, you're roughly running a 9-minute pace or whatever. So you would start your glucose polymers about 30 minutes in, and then have one every 30 minutes. You've spared your glycogen, you've got gas in the tank for the end. And then technically near the end of the race, you don't need to take in anything but water. Okay, so that's what you do during. Okay, now afterwards, well, the race is done. Who cares, man? I'm done. No, it means everything. Okay, write this down. Remember this. The most important time to recover and get ready for your next event or training is post-event nutrition. All right, within 1 hour, you need to have high glycemic carbohydrates again. All right, around 200 to 300 calories worth of high glycemic carbohydrates. What? High glycemic? You just said it's gonna, we use it immediately. It's gonna turn the fat. No, it won't, okay? What happens after a hard, intense event is you've used up a lot of your glycogen, all right? And there's little cells running around in your body grabbing up all of the extra glucose because your body knows what the hell it's doing. We are amazing machines, Our Creator made us so amazing to be so self-sufficient, but you gotta feed it, all right? So your body is actually pulling up any form of sugar basically out there. So, I had some friends who were sugar junkies, and I think a lot of us can be, right? And they would love Coca-Cola and Dr. Pepper and all this kind of stuff. Dr. Pepper came to mind because I remembered a friend that was his favorite. And, they didn't want to eat it all the time or drink it all the time because, they're afraid it was going to make them fat. And look, soda's not great, and it probably would. But, he understood this message. So after, he would train, he would go get this, Dr. Pepper. It would be like his treat. Now, please, people, don't go telling people Rob Maxwell, the trainer, told you to drink soda. I'm not saying that. I'm saying if you were going to do it, right after training would be the time. If you don't have weight to lose, all right? So it makes no sense following all this great nutrition for an event, but then we're not taking care of our general health. I'm talking about if you're trying to recover for events, it's high glycemic index carbohydrates that you want right afterwards. Not a lot, 200 to 300 calories right afterwards. It's got to be within the hour. Me personally, I don't go the soda route. I just think I don't want to put that crap into my body. Not saying I've never done it or don't do it. I'm just saying it's not regularly on my plan. So I'll have some sports drink mixed with some protein, and sometimes I'll just have a bar, like a Cliff Bar or something that has all that in it. And then a little bit after that, say an hour or so, then you want to eat your normal meal. But it's important to have some kind of recovery drink, and they actually make it. You can go to the bike shops and health food stores and get some kind of recovery drinks. You don't have to do that. Just get in some high glycemic sugary type foods right afterwards. Like certain high sugary fruits, or almond milk mixed with something, or potentially even fruit juice mixed with something, or again a bar of some kind. Just get it right afterwards, and you will be on your road to recovery. Okay, so there's everyday storage of glycogen, 60% or so of your diet, pre-race nutrition, which is 2 to 3 hours beforehand. If it's going to be within an hour, just skip your meal and get into your during race nutrition quicker. Then it's going to be during your event, and again, that's every 30 minutes of high glycemic foods. Then right afterwards, it's going to be high glycemic, okay? So know when to go low and know when to go high. And, I hope this helps. And this is something I really enjoy talking about. And, ask me any questions you want. And once again, I have to thank our sponsors because, we need sponsors to be able to put on our podcast. And again, that's John and Lynn and the Gildan Group. And if you guys need any help with anything regarding that, their number is 386-852-5411. Okay? I thank you, and I want you to have a great day today. Be Max Fit and be Max Well.